Hey, there we are. Finally,
Perfect.
good to have you here. Really nice to meet you, Maddie. We've met before in person, but I'm really happy that a lot of more people will meet you as well, because you're a genius in all the things that you're doing around Copilot, and of course a lot more around it. But it's really nice that you're going to share your knowledge on Team Copilot, because we have the advent calendar where we have every day someone else who's sharing their knowledge, and today it's your turn. So right on the other side of the world as well. I think I'm in the Netherlands, and you are. Where are you
Mhm.
based?
I'm based in the United States. I'm out of Minnesota. So specifically for the people who are in Minnesota, it's near the Twin Cities, but we're just outside, about an hour outside.
Great, good to have you here. Can you do a little bit of an introduction about who you are?
Definitely. Thank you so much, I will say, also for having me. It's really fun to continue to connect with you and Team Copilot and get to know your guys' initiatives and what you've been up to. It's been you're an encouragement. So genius is definitely a generous title for me today because you all certainly know plenty as well. But I'm excited to share what I do. I am our Copilot training and adoption specialist. I lead our training and adoption program at RSM underneath our modern work program specifically, our modern work department. And so I'm really excited to be here to share specifically some tips around Copilot governance and what we typically try to walk through with many of our clients around some of the SharePoint Advanced Management reporting and a lot of the Copilot Control Center within Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which is what I think is just really important that everybody knows if they're looking to deploy Copilot. So
Great, and you're an MCT and an MVP, I think, right?
yes, yeah, I am both. I just renewed for my MCT, so
Congrats.
so I was pretty excited about that. And then yes, Copilot and Microsoft 365 MVP.
So if people have some questions for you, they can reach out on LinkedIn about the session, but probably as well about the MCT and MVP program.
Yes, please do. Yeah, there's a lot there, and we always are looking for more people who are interested in growing their user base and understanding what these technologies can do and how we can empower people to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Great. So I put your presentation on, and good luck. Thank you so much for sharing.
perfect. Yes, thank you, Funka. So, as I mentioned today, hoping to do a bit of a governance deep dive in terms of Copilot. I think that this is a super, super important thing that many individuals are considering. Some people maybe don't initially group security and Copilot as being a part of the same conversation, if you will. But I really think that Copilot, when we have this conversation around what we are to do, how we can implement it, security definitely needs to be a part of that conversation. Not because of the fact that Copilot doesn't adhere to a variety of security controls, but because it does. And because when we are actively implementing some of these controls in our Microsoft 365 environments, Copilot adheres to that and will follow suit. I like to say Copilot is permissions based. And so, especially from an end user perspective, which is my heart, a lot of what I do in my day to day, Microsoft 365 Copilot governance is definitely one of those key pieces where, from a permissioning perspective, we want to make sure that users understand kind of what can I and can't I see when I ask Copilot some of these questions, or what can Copilot see and not see, if you will. So, I already did a little bit of an introduction for myself, but this is a little bit more about me. Absolutely love this quote that's here across the right, mostly just because of the fact that time is my most valuable resource. And I am truly honored to be here to celebrate, or to share some of that with you, I should say, and celebrate even just Christmas, Advent. I love what Femke and Team Copilot has been trying to accomplish with that piece of it. And so that's really fun to be a part of this type of event in that way. As a aside, I'm also a boy mom and a Labradoodle mom. So a lot of fun to be both of those things. As you mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. little bit of my link. My LinkedIn link is listed there across the right, as well as my personal website. So I do have a blog. I do share things like Tech Tip Tuesdays, I call it. And so on Tuesdays, I do my best to share just about every Tuesday, not quite, but just about every Tuesday, a quick tip around Microsoft 365 technologies, whether that's Copilot, Teams, SharePoint, really whatever seems to spark my attention that week that I think people need to be more aware of. So please connect with me should we have any questions after today's session. So as we start to propel ourselves into this conversation, one of the easy ways I think to do that is to highlight one of the things that I think just about everyone knows in terms of the security around Copilot. The first thing is Copilot, the enterprise data protection. So I've highlighted this in the screenshot on the right. On the right side, we've got that little green shield. And when you hover over it, and for those of you who are a little bit more visual of a learner or hands-on, please feel free to jump into your Copilot interface. As we jump into the Copilot interface, you will see that little green shield. It bounces around sometimes in terms of where its location is, especially if you're accessing from mobile or desktop. And so look for that green shield. Usually it's in the top right, top left, bottom left. It really can be any of those corners or those areas. So as you jump into that, or as you hover over that main space, you'll be able to see that it offers you a link to be able to learn more about enterprise data protection. Now, enterprise data protection is one of those key pieces and key differentiators for Copilot against many of the other tools that are out there. Now, ChatGPT is one of the easiest ones to make some comparisons for, but even ChatGPT, Claude, and many of the other really common or very well-known types of generative AI do also offer an enterprise data protection or an enterprise version of their generative AI that essentially says that their generative AI is not being trained on your information. Your information is protected and it's confidential. So from an end user perspective, in terms of that data privacy, what I tell users is that when we go to upload, whether that's something from our OneDrive, something from our SharePoint, wherever it is, we can think about that similarly to how we think about uploading something into OneDrive or SharePoint. Why do we trust OneDrive? Why do we trust SharePoint? Because we have those enterprise protection or that data protection that is standing behind us being able to utilize those different platforms. And the same goes for Copilot. And so when we go to use this platform, we have that enterprise data protection that is Microsoft's commitment to safety. That's why you're required to log in with your enterprise account, meaning for Femke, that would be probably Wartel. For myself, that's RSM, which is the organization that I work for. Fantastic organization, if I will add. Feel free to reach out to us for anything audit, tax, consulting related. We do it all. But then that encryption on both ends of the conversation is really key there. So encrypting your information while we are kind of having that conversation with Copilot to ensure that that data isn't really going anywhere else. So again, those are some of those key pieces, especially a great concern for people who have that work tab on the left. You see in the picture here, we've got the web versus work. The work side says Copilot has access to your Microsoft 365 information. So one of the biggest concerns, of course, is, are we protecting that information? And that stamp, that first enterprise data protection stamp, is one of the first ways we know. Now, for the rest of today's session, I'm actually going to pivot into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Now, within the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, there is a space called the Copilot Control Center. The Copilot Control Center is one of my favorite places to highlight all of the different ways in which we have the ability to fine-tune and really customize our Microsoft Copilot experience. And in terms of that customization, and in terms of what we have the ability to adjust and highlight and make transitions to, this allows us to better tell our end users or communicate to our end users what we are and aren't comfortable with at this time with generative AI and with this tool. Now, Microsoft does a great job at keeping the things that seemingly should be default to default, so that we aren't hampering really the Copilot experience in a way that makes it so that users don't want to adopt it, because adoption is, of course, also a concern. If we are restricting too many things, are people still going to adopt it? Because does it do the same or does it do similar to what we would expect but ChatGPT or Claude? If users are using some of these other types of platforms, are we ensuring that this platform, that Copilot, if we are trying to drive users to this platform instead of others, are we ensuring that those barriers to entry are as minimal as possible? Or at the very least, that we are communicating what those barriers to entry is and why. So my other recommendation as we make this transition into the Copilot space or into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center is to configure an acceptable use policy if you don't already have that in place. Most organizations do today around generative AI and the appropriate usages of what that should look like. But for those of you who don't, definitely look to include the do's and the don'ts and the why behind it and communicate that well. So I will go ahead and share my screen now, and we'll showcase that Microsoft 365 Admin Center. There's a little bit of a learning curve, I will say, around my experience with StreamYard, which is our platform today. And so forgive me as things are a little bit slower as I make that transition over. All right, perfect. So on my screen, we see my Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Now on the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, as I mentioned, the primary place where we're going to camp out is the Copilot drop-down across the left. Now, most of you, in terms of accessing this, if we have some individuals who are not admins on this call today, typically the admin controls that I've seen that will allow you to see this Copilot dropdown is going to be the AI administrator, otherwise also the global administrator. So those are two that I know for sure offhand. I am not a roles expert in the Microsoft 365, so some of you might already be commenting live, and I can't see it. So some of you may already be commenting live to say this role and this role, which is great. That's part of what I love about being a part of this community. Please do share and tell and educate each other as to what roles certainly accomplish giving us this proper access today. But those are two for sure that I believe will give us this access. And so if you see this, you likely have one of those assigned to your account. So on the Copilot dropdown here across the left, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Overview tab just to we're going to walk through each of these. The main area that I'm going to camp out is Settings, and I'll explain why in a moment. But from the Copilot Control System, this is where in this main window, you will see some recommendations, some keys to success, some adoption metrics. Now, of course, my metrics are going to look different than yours. And that's part of the value, of course, that we're seeing here is that each of us in our individual tenants and our individual organizations will get some recommendations and insights around how we are doing in terms of our Copilot journey and ways in which we can improve. And so this is one of the first things right away that I recommend taking a quick look at. Now, metrics aren't perfect. I would say that just as humans aren't perfect, just as some of these insights, I think, and the newness, frankly, around this tool, it's one of those things where we're still seeing people create some workarounds using Power BI to capture some of these insights, to capture some of these use cases, whether that's forms, some more of the manual effort in an effort to capture some of these pieces, because some of the general adoption metrics, some of the general insights around how Copilot is being used is still a little bit vague. And that's me speaking frankly. I think that there's a lot of improvement from what I've heard from some of the Microsoft teams that is still in the works to make sure that this becomes that much more and more of value. I also think that the Viva Insights platform, if you're looking for more of these types of metrics, the Viva Insights platform, and forget that some of those Copilot insights are going to be a little bit more robust there. So definitely check that out. But wanted to highlight this as one of the first pages. You'll also see security as this sub tab here across the right. And you can start to see what Microsoft does to protect your data. So this security tab is one of those main areas also for you to start to consider. So we see some data leakage in Copilot interactions, how it is doing that, how it's preventing some of those pieces. This is all kind of built off of and continues to expand the Purview platform. And so unfortunately, as much as I wish that the Copilot Control System, which is listed here, was your one-stop shop for all things Copilot related, you will still need to navigate some of these other types of platforms to continue to fine-tune your Copilot experience. And that includes Purview. So within the Purview portal, you will see, if you click on this link as well, this would bring you to Microsoft Learn. But in the Microsoft Purview portal, you will see things like DSPM for AI. You will see things like sensitivity labels and data loss prevention working hand in hand with Copilot. So once we start to configure things like sensitivity labels, you will start to see those labels applied to Copilot. And in my interactions with Copilot, I see that sensitivity label applied. So these are reasons why I recommend we start to take this deeper dive look at what is available to us here. This points us in those right directions at the very least. And if you have questions in terms of where can I go to manage this or change some of these things, that Copilot within the Admin Center has also been helpful for that reason, which you do see populates here for me on the right-hand side to help me find some of those settings. So in addition to some of that general data leakage, you also see some oversharing risks. And this is where we start to get into some of the SharePoint components. In terms of oversharing, many organizations do not have a proper information architecture in place. And what I mean by that is when we've continued to maintain our SharePoint, we haven't always maintained the groups that are given access to certain SharePoint sites. We haven't always reviewed some of the link settings in terms of what links can be reviewed. So we'll take a look at that here in a moment. But data oversharing at a high level, this is kind of what starts to highlight that. And you can jump into improve permissions as well to start taking steps there. Data compliance is that other piece here across the bottom. But then as we look at health and discover, this is where we can continue to see some of the general information that you need to be aware of in terms of updates that might be required, how users are interacting with Copilot, and how we could potentially take some steps to push through those latest updates. Now, the Discover page is typically where it starts to show you some licensing. As you can see in real time, the price updated on my screen. One of the pricing pieces that I would actually point you to is the bundles that are now available for Copilot for, I believe it is Business Premium, Business Standard, and potentially even E3, E5 types of licensing bundled with Copilot to give you kind of a reduced rate on both of those types of licensing. So definitely check that out. One of the things that I get excited about is, again, kind of thinking about that reduced barrier to entries when we see that cost start to change a little bit too. So that's our overview. Not too much more that I'm going to touch on there. Connectors is pretty straightforward. For those of you who are looking to extend your use of what Copilot has access to, this is one of the things where you can go ahead and manage or utilize your connections by connecting Copilot to some other third-party or Microsoft compatible types of applications or platforms. So as we look at some additional connections, not too much that I'm going to highlight here, but Microsoft Copilot or Microsoft 365 Copilot natively has access to OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. You'll see chat integrated in that space. So in terms of what Copilot can do there, we want to think about it more as those high-level applications. Those applications users are pretty ingrained with in their day-to-day. Even applications like Forms, Copilot is also available there. So you'll continue to see expanded usages there, but things like Dynamics and your CRM platforms, they may require some of these connections or connectors in order to utilize Copilot at a high level. Now, Search is also one of those pieces where we can start to see some of the search bookmarks and acronyms that Microsoft has pushed through. And that's where it also encourages you to continue to manage those connections to make sure that the adequate knowledge sources are there for what users would expect to be. For billing and usage, not something that I'm going to talk too much about. I am not a billing expert. The pricing is one thing that I get excited about only because if we get it low enough, more people are excited about participating. But the settings is where we're primarily camping out today. The settings continues to get more and more expansive. This list of what we have the ability to configure, what we have the ability to turn on and off. I like to say that at RSM, and specifically what my role is when I come in and support an organization, is to help you lay that solid foundation, but also help you to understand where are those light switches. How can I turn it on? How can I turn things off? How can I fine tune and manage my experience for myself as well? And so I want you to be aware of these things, and this is why we're showcasing the settings here today. Within each of the settings, I do recommend that if you are an admin in this space, if you haven't already, click line by line. Go through every single one of these pieces, click into the Learn applications or the Learn articles within some of these places, and read about what each of these settings are so that you are aware of what is by default turned on or what is by default turned off. Could my organization be benefiting from this if I went ahead and curated it? So those are the types of questions I challenge you to continue to think through as we walk through these different settings today. I'm going to highlight a good chunk of these with the time that we have today, a good majority, but again, there's still deeper dives that you can do even after this, which is perhaps your homework for after our session today too. So the first piece is the pinning of Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. Of course, Microsoft wants this to be as readily available for users as possible. Again, if you are an organization that has said, we are Copilot centric, we are a Microsoft 365 shop, we have Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. We are utilizing all of these different Microsoft platforms. And so it is, of course, an application that we want readily available for users to try to draw them away from some of these other versions of generative AI that perhaps we don't have an enterprise agreement with, such as Copilot or ChatGPT, I should say, Claude, Grok, etc., Perplexity, all of them, whatever that might be. And so pinning the Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat enables users to feel that much more empowered, again, lowering the barrier to entry. So it is recommended to pin Copilot Chat, but it is also by default turned on. And so I know when I was working with some of my other clients, initially it was this scramble and this mad dash of, we don't know what Copilot does yet, and yet it's everywhere. How do we turn it off? And so this was one of those places where we certainly became very aware of, and it was certainly an opportunity for us to educate more and more of our clients on what are the implications, what are the things that Copilot Chat can do if we aren't utilizing that licensed version, because we don't have the work access with Copilot Chat natively. The users would have to have both this turned on as well as that Microsoft 365 Copilot license in order to have that work tab enabled. So do note that. This is just essentially saying that we want to allow Copilot for the web to be available and pinned everywhere, regardless if a user has a license. So selecting your preference there, definitely go through that. Again, by default, it is typically set to pin. Now, the Windows taskbar, pinning Copilot apps to the Windows taskbar, pretty straightforward in terms of what's available there. As you can see, this one that we've set is do not. You'll see that the recommendation is to pin in the Windows taskbar. So you have that option. So that will make it so that it's pinned across some of those machines that you have enabled into your environment or that are more managed there. The Opal tool here is one of the tools that I got really excited about because I had the opportunity to see this live and see this demonstrated for me at Ignite. Now, Opal is one of the tools that is an agent that Microsoft has developed, but this agent capability is much more in line with that agent boss type of mentality. What we configure and what we allow Opal to do allows us and empowers us to set it and forget it in some ways. I hate using that term because it's not necessarily forget it, but it is one of those things where we can turn it on and say, please run through this particular task. And then we can come back and see what specifically it's done, how it's accomplished that. And it has receipts essentially of what it's done to get to that end goal. So learning more about Opal, this frontier agent, is definitely something I recommend everybody to start to look around with. I think this is going to be much more of the future of agents and what we see agents being able to do. Opal opens up a virtual machine to be able to access these different components that we ask it to do, and we give it the access that it needs in order to run through the variety of different requests. So again, definitely something I recommend you checking out and utilizing. A lot of other pieces here. Copilot for Security is now included in your E5. That's the only piece that I will note here in terms of Copilot Security. It's now included in the E5 license cost, so that's something to get excited about. Also was an announcement at Ignite in case you missed that. Microsoft 365 Copilot self-service purchases. This was something that when we first saw the Copilot Control Center start to be rolled out, it was set to allow by default, to make it so that users can try or buy this product on their own. Now, if that is a concern of yours within your organization, and you do not want users to utilize their own versions of Copilot in terms of that self-service trial or purchase without an administrator's help, then this is one of those pieces where you would want to adjust accordingly. And to either be allow trials only or do not allow. Again, up to your organization in terms of what your overall preference is and comfort level with that trial type of purchase or trial or purchase type of option. Some organizations love that this is an option to say that it isn't a cost that they will incur, but rather allowing users to set up that own type of cost if this is something that is vitally important to what they seek to do. So that would be that option. Microsoft 365 Copilot in the admin centers, as we highlighted, that's that Copilot button up across the top and across many of those other admin centers to say, we find value in utilizing Copilot to even just help me track down where's the right place to manage this setting. Because I think that the challenge has always been, and maybe the fun part is it's a bit of a scavenger hunt to figure out which admin center the appropriate setting needs to resolve or needs to be used. I think about Teams. That's where I started in terms of my Microsoft journey, utilizing much more of the Teams in the admin center. And so managing Teams in the admin center, sure, I can manage a lot of different settings from there, but if things aren't also configured in my Entra suite, or if some of those things in terms of collaborating across tenants and allowing some of those settings, if that isn't configured there, then it's not going to work in Teams. So there are some of those top level admin centers, I like to say, that require a certain a check to be, or a box to be checked before any of the other admin centers will allow. It will actually adhere to the policy that we've kind of opened the door to, because there's multiple doors and to be able to open. So they're kind of managing that or being aware of that. That's how we use, or how I've found value in that Copilot admin center or within the admin center there. Copilot pay-as-you-go billing is one of those things that's available here too. Again, not a billing expert, but one of the options that you have available. And then as I look at my list here, these options are one that you may or may not have access to today. Most of us, everything up until now is native to the Copilot Control Center. It's available to you within the Control Center regardless. But these next couple settings are going to be available to those of you who have Viva added to your tenant. Viva is one of the platforms that I think is underrated. I've done several talks on what the Viva capabilities are across Pulse and Insights and Goals and Glint. Now, Goals, unfortunately, is being retired within the next couple weeks. However, there are still many of the other Viva applications that are incredibly powerful and impactful for an organization. So if you are someone who is looking to collect more survey type of information, employee experience, in types of platforms, Viva is one that I do recommend you take a look at. And so if you have Viva in your environment, you'll see a couple of different ways to be able to update and allow for a Copilot within some of those spaces. If I were to click on one of these just to show you what that looks like, you'll see that it's typically just an org-wide setting and then some custom policies in terms of that on-off configuration for that. So again, you may also see some other settings depending on your licensing, part of the personalization of Microsoft. I like to say that there are 3 key themes most of the time across Microsoft 365, and it is personalization or customization. It is also, and that's one of those main themes. The other 2, I'll follow up with you all in terms of what those typically look like as well. Copilot and Edge is one of those pieces that we saw a little bit on a highlight platform. Maybe Femke, I'd be curious if you had the same experience, but Copilot and Edge is one where I started to see Edge have more and more of a presence at Ignite. I think they're trying to continue to promote this as a platform with potential, as a platform that we want to continue to push forward in terms of Copilot's integrations and the value that's there. And so I saw this Edge for Business communication and much more of these exciting pieces around what's available there. So check out some of the settings that's available to you there and what you prefer, what you need, what you want to see within that space. Copilot and Bing, Edge, and Windows. This is where you can start to see what that looks like. Again, the commercial data protection link for Learn is also available here. So if you're looking to learn more about that commercial data protection or that enterprise data protection a bit more, you can start to click on that link and better understand what that looks like, what that means, and how we can certainly continue to enforce that across our organization. Now, this last one here is one of my favorites, and it is the Copilot Frontier program. If you are someone who wants to stay on the cutting edge of what's available, now every organization has their different risk mitigation, and every organization has their different comfort levels with being a part of programs that give us early access to things, because early access also means that sometimes things don't work perfectly, always. Whereas if I have a more mature version of Microsoft Teams, for example, my experience is likely to be more consistent. But if I'm in one of those earlier rings, Frontier being one of those earlier rings of these platforms, sometimes there's going to be things that do or don't work as continued improvements and things that are being refined and tested continue to change. And so there is a risk that comes a little bit with some of these platforms, which is why perhaps you want to say specific users. Maybe I'm going to say my Copilot early adopters, and my Copilot early adopters group or adoption viewer group, because of course in a demo, I'm not able to find my specific user group. But in terms of those pieces, you have that option across web apps, desktop and mobile apps, as well as agents to be able to get some early access to these pieces. I think it's really really impactful and powerful for people to be able to add at least maybe one person to that Frontier Features, so that one individual or those 2 or 3 individuals across your organization can start to see things and stay on the up and up, or being aware of what's to come or what's most likely to come, so that we can start to do some research and make decisions for the organizations to keep us ahead of what's coming. That's really the big recommendation that I would have for you there. So Frontier Features, definitely something to keep in mind. Now, if we were having a session where I could see all of our questions and answers, I can see some of your questions perhaps, but if we have some more questions as we move through, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'm happy to help answer them along the way. Data access is my next tab that we're going to jump into. Data access is one of these pieces where we can start to fine tune some of the data and security components. So from here, we see web search for Microsoft Copilot allowing access to the web search. This is your Copilot chat for the web. For this piece, it is turned on for the entire organization by default. And again, that's intended because what users expect when we open up Copilot chat and we are saying, yes, I want to access the web, users typically expect us to access anything that is publicly available, or that this tool can access anything that is publicly available, just like Google, just like Bing, just like ChatGPT. And when I go to access the web tab, when I go to ask Copilot a question, I want it to have the most up-to-date information. And that's what web search empowers us or allows us to access. Now, depending on your organization's comfort level with that enterprise data protection, commercial protection, you can learn more about this setting as well and determine whether or not your organization feels comfortable having that web search that is turned on. If you turn it off, essentially we are saying we only want access to what the LLM was built off of. And that could be, I believe it's information up to 2017. So that continues to be adjusted and be changed. But if you turn off web search, it will not have the most up-to-date information. So that's one of the pieces to keep in mind if we disable that. Recommendations for licensing. This one's a good one, I would say, whether you want to see recommendations for Copilot licenses or not. Recommending users for Copilot license assignment. It's helpful to better understand kind of that adoption journey. So that's where I would say that those recommendations come into play. With people skills, this is one where I want to take a full deep dive into being able to talk through people skills, being able to expound upon the value and the opportunities that people skills brings us to be able to set up and manage this in the organization. I highly recommend you do so as well. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to meet some of the people skills team, some of the engineers that are working on this product at one of my local user group conferences recently. And it was really exciting just to see the passion and the forward thinking that they really have as to how our people and the skills that our people bring, how we can combine that with Copilot's understanding of our environment to be able to identify some of these gaps and continue to grow the organization. So this is definitely one of those things that I recommend you check out as well. I don't have enough time today to go in depth on that, but that one is definitely one piece to check out. Data security and compliance, how Copilot references your documents. This is your one-stop shop for all of the different settings and policies where you can go to manage all of these different settings and policies within the Purview portal. So when I am walking a organization through some of these data security and compliance components, many times this is my checklist. It is, have we had the conversations around data security posture management, DSPM for AI? This is one of the newest pieces on this list. So admittedly, a lot of organizations still answer no, and that's okay. That's a good thing. It means that there's opportunities for us to grow. But then we also see things like insider risk management, sensitivity labels, retention policies, communication compliance, e-discovery, audit. These are the different pieces that sometimes we aren't, or we are less aware of, and we need to be more aware of as to how we can be utilizing these tools in our organization, not just because we have Copilot, but because Copilot can heighten our the instability of what we have yet to configure. And that's kind of what we like to showcase, or what I like to emphasize a little bit for us there too. So make sure that we utilize or review that compliance checklist or that checklist a little bit, because again, that the components that are available to you within Purview is really important and really helpful to better understand and to continue to empower your journey. I love the sensitivity labels piece when I'm asking Copilot some questions, and I now see Copilot has a sensitivity label that starts to show up, whether that's a little red shield, a little green shield. that says this information is considered whatever that might be by your organization. And it offers that label, continues to show that type of information. So that's definitely some things to review. Now, Copilot and Power Platform and Dynamics 365. This is your agent space. This is going to be pointing you to how we can manage some of the settings related to some of the agents that you are likely to configure. Power Platform in particular is where we can start to fine tune some of the Copilot Studio settings. So again, as I mentioned, unfortunately, this isn't a one-stop shop. It isn't where I can manage all of these settings in one place, but it is one of those tools where you have the opportunity to be pointed to where it is that you need to go. So we can learn more about what that looks like. You can go to the Power Platform Admin Center, start to poke around and start to look at what settings do I have to change? What settings do I have available to me within this space? So Copilot and Power Platform, AI providers operating as Microsoft subprocessors and other large language models. Both of these pieces are newer to me. So admittedly, this is where being an expert or genius in this space, always learning, I would say. So in full transparency and humility, I will say these are two areas that I have to do a deep dive into. I need to better understand, what does this look like? What does this mean? What recommendations would I have for an organization looking to do that? So maybe get back to me within a week, or reach out to me in a week and ask me this question. I'll look to my community to hold me accountable maybe on asking whether or not we've reviewed this and what recommendation I would have given some of these other contexts that we've reviewed so far. But as we click into some of these pieces, you can start to see in particular, so AI providers, this is one where Anthropic, actually, this is one that I have been having some conversations with our clients about, because of the fact that Anthropic is one of the tools where there are some specific terms that need to be agreed to prior to being able to utilize this type of tool. So there are terms and conditions that you have to review. So there's a data protection addendum, product terms, and some outlining T's and C's that you have to make sure to determine, again, is this in line with your organization's risk appetite or risk tolerance, if you will. For many organizations that I've worked with, if we're looking to consider or stay within the bounds of that commercial data protection and enterprise data protection, this is one space where data protection started to fall within the Anthropic space instead of being available to us or staying within our Microsoft environment. So if that is you, then many organizations I've worked with has said, let's disable it. Let's not allow some of these pieces for now. But I will say that there's been some news around Anthropic purchasing some Azure storage with the hopes that maybe this won't be a requirement for us, and we will still be able to utilize the Claude models without needing to set a separate agreement in place. So look into that. Definitely review some of those pieces. That's everything I know up until this point. Some of you may be much more in tune with or aware of these than I. So please feel free to reach out. Let me know your thoughts on that too. Agents, this is one of my favorite places, or one of the places where most people want to go and understand. When we click on the agent space, there are two main settings that you can see are available to us here. Now, the key thing for you to be aware of and to know is that who has access to agents and who can share agents within your organization are the only two settings that are available to you here. So it isn't talking about who can create agents. It is just saying who can access and who can share. So if we are looking to restrict this and we're looking to restrict the creation, then typically that's where we would want to say we want to minimize this down to all users, to no users, or to specific users and groups. And so far, that's one of the main ways I've seen organizations start to tailor down or minimize the users that have the ability to create. Because who has access is kind of the more broad access control to say not just who can access or who can create, I should say, but who can access at all. So this is where some organizations, again, that I've worked with has set the specific users and groups to be your Copilot group. So maybe I've got my Copilot, and I've got a jumping keyboard here, my Copilot early adopters group. And this is where maybe I want to say only my pilot group that I am working with right now to pilot Copilot can access agents. And I can start to see what are the differences between those different groups for now. And kind of testing and trialing out some of those pieces in that way. So determining your preference for that, setting it to be all access or setting it so that all users have access also allows for some really great intuitive creations. So when you start to review Agents 365, which again is a whole nother session that we could walk through, but Agent 365 will start to give us the ability to see what agents have people started to create. Where are we starting to see people find value? Or what types of gaps are people able to fill using agents in our organization today? And people are far more creative than we sometimes give them credit for. So that all users can sometimes be, again, depending on the organization, depending on your preference, you have the ability to configure that there. And then your sharing settings. Who do we want to allow? Is it something where maybe, sure, we're going to allow all users to access, but for now, we're going to say only specific users can share their creations. So we want to keep it individualistic at the very least. But those are your options across data access. These other two, with my final couple minutes that we have available to us, are much shorter lists. So it gives us perfect timing, I would say, for us today. But the Copilot actions, right now are video generation, Teams meetings, and image generation. Video generation is one of the newer settings that have fallen within this window. Image generation and Teams meetings are some of those things that we're kind of used to seeing a little bit. This, again, in terms of your one-stop shop in some ways with Copilot Control Center, this is your checklist saying if you want to update your preferences for Copilot within Teams meetings, and I don't mean to keep opening that, if you want to update your preference for what Copilot can do in meetings, in terms of recording, in terms of transcription, in terms of is a Copilot always on? How do I want to set those preferences? That's primarily within the Teams Admin Center. Video generation is also an exciting feature, one of the newer things we were hearing discussed within Ignite circles as well. In terms of allowing this or not allowing this, I believe it is a Sora integration that we're potentially going to be seeing here. Don't quote me on that, but it's something to be excited about in terms of where we are seeing this tool continue to be progressed towards. So some really, really impactful, some really, really just high quality types of videos that could potentially be made in this space, as well as image generation, of course, a couple of those other settings that you can configure there too. The last option that you have here is one of the most underrated options, I think, for some organizations. We don't always realize, we don't always click through all of these different tabs. And so hopefully by the time you get to this other settings, you're not exhausted by the others, because Copilot Custom Dictionary is one of the ones that I get really excited about. Because if you have an organization that uses a lot of acronyms, RSM is one of them. I mean, our name seems like it should be an acronym, but it isn't. But RSM is one of those organizations that has a lot of internal acronyms. We have a lot of different verbiage and jargon that we use across the organization. And so if we were to say, Copilot, just so that you are aware, here are all the different language and verbiage that we use across our organization, Copilot will be that much more in tune to help answer our questions and be able to understand and be aware of what are those proper nouns, what are those acronyms, so that when I input them in my question to Copilot, it automatically knows and is smart enough and intuitive enough to be able to figure that out. Now, to a degree, it is today, I will say, because it has access to our work information. If that's stored on a SharePoint of all of the different acronyms and pieces, then it will likely be able to help understand a little bit better because of that. But custom dictionaries, nonetheless, fine-tune that experience all the more. So definitely recommend, again, you check that one out too. But with that, diagnostic logs is the last one that we have to cover today. Across all of the Copilot Control Center, diagnostic logs is us allowing to be able to log some troubleshooting issues or some problems that we've been having on behalf of others. So if we'd rather be the ones to be able to report those, that's where we have that ability to log that and manage that ticket and really some of that information with Microsoft, I should say, to potentially get some feedback as well. A lot that we covered across. This is a session, as you can imagine, that I really love having a bit more of that collaboration back and forth to hear from you all as to what are your preferences, what is your feedback. But I nonetheless feel it's an incredibly important topic. And so thank you so much, Femke, for allowing me to make this today.
Thank you for doing this. It's fantastic to see everything that's possible in the backhand, in the administration portal. And I think you give a lot of people a lot of homework. I have the feeling that Donna Sakar is here. She's always give you homework. So we're doing the same. And it's funny that it's like everything changing so fast. So it could be like really relevant to do this lots of time, seeing what is changing and what are the things that you can actually can use and put in place. Or I also love like the things that you said on the frontier part, that some people can say, okay, a few people already has the ability to be a frontier, figuring out what it is, and then you can scale, for example, or some content around it, or knowing what the new things are. Thanks for sharing, Maddie. And I think a lot of people love this. We don't have really a lot of questions, but all thumbs up. And a lot of people say that it's really good to had your session here. So thank you for sharing, and see you next time, probably. Merry Christmas.
Likewise. And if there are other questions, people, I'm sure, can reach out to me on LinkedIn and everything too. But thank you so much again for creating the space and the opportunity to share it. And Merry Christmas to you and Team Copilot.
Bye-bye.